Just inboard of the flotation gear towards us. One of the other divers just slid off the flotation gear. A third one is sitting. The boat is in the water, I'm told, and is now coming around. Yes, here it comes up from the starboard side, swinging up in very calm water, which the ship has created by its swing around. Now we can look right over on top of the capsule. In just a moment, the boat's going to be reaching it. I don't know what the albatross are after, but they're out here by the score, following both the motor whaleboat with its crew and swinging out around over the capsule. What's the recording
I think I'd better interrupt that report from the Kearsarge again briefly to tell you that the Kearsarge is coming alongside the capsule and will lift it on board the flight deck of the carrier. As you may have heard, Astronaut Cooper has already sent a message to the captain of the Kearsarge, Captain Eugene P. Rankin, who comes from Van Buren, Arkansas, apologizing for not coming down on the number 3 elevator of the carrier. That would have been a bullseye indeed. Nobody ever expected that, but this one was close enough to a bullseye to qualify for it. And as Joe Campbell reported, I believe a moment ago, if I could make him out correctly through that rather bad signal from the Western Pacific, the carrier is now 200 to 300 yards off the capsule, and the pickup should be made very soon now. Let's try once again to see if we can make anything out of Joe Campbell's report from the carrier.
The capsule. I'm talking now of the motor whaleboat, which is cutting in towards the ship in relatively calm waters, created by the swing around of the ship and the backing down action. We now have less wind than we had before. An albatross came within about 10 feet of our face here. 100 yards over to the capsule, which is bobbing gently. Very gently. The swells are only running, as I told you a little earlier, about 4 to 6 feet. To recap for you, Gordon sent word to the helicopter pilot that he would like to be brought aboard by the crane on the number 3 elevator, which is now down. The boat just was crossed the line from the number 3 elevator. They're pulling out a cable. A long line is being dragged out towards the capsule. This line is being let out towards as the boat heads in the direction now of the capsule. I would assume from that wake behind the ship that we're backing down slightly. But now it's about 50 yards between the boat and the capsule. About 50 yards between the motor whaleboat and the capsule. The capsule has drifted out a little bit from the ship. I'd say it's now about 150 yards out. They just removed the antenna from the capsule so that they can hook the hook aboard. We are backing down now, definitely backing down, pulling the ship into position so that the capsule can be hoisted aboard number 3 elevator here on the USS Kearsarge. Let me recap for you while we're waiting for the boat to reach the capsule. A little bit ago, at about near perfect time when they predicted it, it's about a little less than a half hour ago now. Through the clouds, we can see the chute open beautifully, and the capsule impacted in the water with...
While we're listening to this report from Joe Campbell aboard the Kearsarge, we're also listening with our other ear to reports from Colonel Powers, and he says the Kearsarge is now preparing to lift the capsule out of the water. We'll go back now to Joe Campbell on the Kearsarge.
The motor whaleboat now is only a matter of maybe half a dozen yards from the capsule. The divers are all standing around ready to pass the line up with a hook which goes down into a hook on top of the capsule, sort of an inverted U, where it's then hooked and gently brought towards the ship. The line now has been hauled out. I see signals coming up meaning that everything is A-OK at this point. There goes the bow hook out with the line. The bow hook has just extended the line over to the divers who now have it, and they've hooked it. And now they're going to be pulling her in. That was a good job from Tom Templeton. He's a coxswain from Quebec, Tennessee. He just put the bow hook out, handed the line over to the divers. The divers, Ryan Salant and Bert Swift and Dick Nicholson. They're out there on the flotation collar hooking things on. The helicopters are way out in wide circles now, still close enough to come in if needed, but it's a sense they're not going to be needed now. The line is beginning to be made taut. I can see it come up out of the water as they start to pull the capsule gently towards the USS Kearsarge. Down on elevator number 3. The NASA officials are gathering about with their instruments. The doctors, Dr. Richard Pollard, and Lieutenant Colonel Charles Upp, who's in the United States Air Force. Dr. Pollard, incidentally, holds the captain's commission in the United States Army. He is assigned to NASA. They are down on the number 3 elevator, along with McDonnell engineers and NASA photographers. They're all gathering down. John Graham, the team leader, is standing there with earphones, and he's talking, I assume, with the tape, letting them know that everything is going along splendidly. The line is being gently hauled in. Now the capsule is beginning to tilt ever so slightly, as it's being moved towards the USS Kearsarge and the number 3 elevator. Sailors, Marines, all line the starboard side. We still have that slight starboard lift because of the weight of all of these sailors over here. I'm assured that there's no danger whatsoever to the ship. It's just one of those phenomena that develops when everybody runs to the railing on one side of the ship. I doubt seriously if there's a single sailor on the port side of the ship. They're all over here. They line the island. There's not a single place on the island of the carrier anywhere that they aren't perched. On stanchions, on gun mounts, everywhere. The capsule will be pulled in by hand to keep from tilting the capsule. It is being pulled in by hand. Down in the hangar deck, they have a crew pulling on the line, which goes up into a pulley from the giant crane, which extends out to the capsule. The distance is being closed rapidly. Everything is fine. The captain just looked up from the bridge and gave me a circular sign. And the executive officer, Commander Harker, sticking his head out, giving us a victory sign, too. We're all happy, as you can well gather. Captain Gene Rankin, of course, has been involved in this pickup before, when we picked up astronaut Wally Schirra. And now Gordon Cooper, sitting out there in the capsule, just a few yards now, maybe 80 to 100 yards off the starboard beam of the USS Kearsarge.
Another brief interruption of the report by Joe Campbell on the Kearsarge. President Kennedy has been in touch with Mrs. Cooper at her home outside Houston, Texas. Mr. Kennedy said he was amazed at the surprising accuracy of the splashdown. The president invited Mrs. Cooper and her husband, astronaut Cooper, to the White House. And the Senate has just passed a resolution commending Cooper, and the Senate gave him a standing ovation. Now back to Joe Campbell on the Kearsarge.
Down into the water as the distance is narrowed by degrees. As I told you earlier, there's every effort being made to do this absolutely surely, with no haste. Everybody wants to make sure it's a good job. Now we see other planes, there's sky raiders from the ship swinging around here, looking at the sea. It's become slightly overcast, not very much, but the sun's gone behind the clouds. The breeze is, in fact, kind of cool as we pull in the capsule Phase 7. The divers holding on to it, sitting on the opposite side of the capsule, like you would in a sailboat, to keep it from tilting, as the line is being gradually tightened by hand to pull it in to the ship. A line has also been put out for tension to steady the capsule as it's being hauled in. That's being held on the opposite side by the boys in the motor whaleboat. It's a delicate job, a slow one, But as I told you earlier, they want to make absolutely certain that no hitch develops at this stage of the game. The capsule is tilted ever so slightly in our direction. The guys are sitting on the other side of the flotation gear to make sure that it remains upright. It occasionally tilts even a little more. Attention is being held on the other side to keep it from upsetting. The flotation gear is bending, giving a little bit as it's being hauled in towards the number 3 elevator. This may take some time because the going is slow. From the rate of speed that we're coming in, it should take at least another 10 minutes to haul in the capsule. But it's being done ever so gently so as not to upset the capsule in the gear. The divers are all sitting on the opposite side, so as you would when you're in a sailboat, when the sail is being pushed over, they're sitting on the opposite side, to which a line has also been attached to the whaleboat to keep the capsule from tilting over. I'm told that they also want no water in the top of the capsule, which is now open. Of course, it's open with the drogue chute and everything else that was in it. The big chute, all in top of the capsule. That's all out now, and the signalman in the boat is sending a word over. The distance is now, what, about 3 yards from number 3 elevator? They're bringing it in. I'm going to move over here in another vantage point so I can get a better look at the operation. Right now, the capsule is tilting a little, not much. The criterion, I'm told, is to keep water from getting into the top of the capsule. The line from the crane of the Kearsarge is out. The hook is being let down. There's a bosun's mate down there on the number 3 elevator barking out commands through a megaphone. I can't hear them from here. We're up high on the island looking down on top of the scene. The view is unobstructed at this point. Down goes the big pulley, like a block and tackle in a garage. We're getting ready to pick up a motor or something, but this one's going down to pick up phase 7. Capsule now is 20 yards from the number 3 elevator. Motor whaleboat trailing behind with its tension line out to keep the capsule from upsetting. It's a colorful scene. The sun's out again. The Marines are in their dress blue, and the sailors are lining the starboard side all the way aft. The signalman is communicating to the ship by semaphore. That's a hand flag, of course. Now the capsule is just in line. We're going to have to bring it forward a little. The hook is being let down a little more.
Well, that report from Joe Campbell on the Kearsarge has been interrupted momentarily. At the moment, the whaleboat is maneuvering the spacecraft alongside the carrier Kearsarge, which has already put a crane over the side, and it will then lift the spacecraft slowly on board the carrier onto the number 3 elevator. A Marine Guard is standing by to guard the spacecraft when it reaches the deck, and Captain T.S. King, the Commodore of the Mid-Pacific Group of the recovery ships, is standing by to greet the astronaut when he emerges from the capsule. So is Captain Eugene Rankin. Let's hear from Shorty Powers.
Spacecraft is coming out of the water.
Well, we came in right in the middle of that one-sentence announcement. He says the spacecraft is coming out of the water. It's being lifted very slowly onto the carrier Kearsarge. Now, the question still remains how Cooper will decide to emerge from the spacecraft, or rather egress, to use the official NASA word. The chances are that he will decide to blow the explosive bolts on the escape hatch and come out that way. I believe that was the procedure used by Glenn, Carpenter, and Schirra. Let's go back now to Joe Campbell on board the Kearsarge.
Along with some NASA officials, he's talking with John Graham, the team leader. I see the crane crew moving around very quickly. They've got out a christening place there to set the capsule down in. That's so there'll be no markings whatsoever on the capsule. I understand from McDonnell engineers and NASA officials that that's in order that even small meteorite markings can then be studied if there are no scratches on this beautiful capsule. Here she comes. It's now over the number 3 elevator, being gently let down. It's now about 6 feet from the cushion. Here it comes down slowly. It's now about 4 feet. They've got a group of sailors as the flotation collar down on deck, and now the capsule is down. It is tucked in a sort of a box with mattresses in the middle of it. A ladder is being laid alongside of the capsule, apparently to go up and unhook the crane. There goes the flotation collar. It's being lifted away. Down comes the capsule. The crane crew is holding it gently as it's being lowered to take up the distance between the bottom of the cushion heat shield and the bottom of the actual bottom of the capsule. They're holding it for a moment, turning it around, I assume, so that the hat will be pointing in a given direction. Here we come around again. The beautiful letters, United States, printed on the side. No marking on them. The capsule glistens a little here in the sun. Everybody, of course, is just smiling like the familiar old canary, or cat, rather, that ate the canary. Down comes the capsule now. The cushioning is closing. It's a cushioning of a type like in some sofas that you sit on, where the air is gently pushed out after you sit down. Gives you a very soft landing. Here comes the ladder up to the top of the capsule. A sailor is going up to unhook the crane work from the block and tackle. John Graham has just climbed up, rather. John Graham climbed up. He's got his head down in the top of the capsule. Apparently he's talking to Gordo. Lots of photographers are swarming around taking pictures. Navy photographers are in abundance also. Members of the press are kept back off the elevator at a distance of about 20 or 30 feet. Now comes Dr. Pollard. He is the first to open it. The whaleboat is now going out to the other 2 divers who have their suits located. They'll be bringing that in. All the divers will be aboard in just a few moments then. Now I'm looking down on number 3 elevator. Flash bulbs are going off everywhere. They're working around the hatch. I assume these are McDonnell engineers and NASA officials. I can't see because they're blocked. But John Graham is now back down from the ladder where he was looking a moment ago. Dr. Pollard is walking over this way, saying a few from Navy people. The engineers are working around the hatch. John Graham is directly in front of the hatch. There go more flash bulbs. They're taking pictures of this whole thing, making sure that everything is recorded for history. There comes a strap up slightly. They're getting set to blow the hatch, as I understand it. In just a few seconds, they should be blowing the hatch. They're moving back out of the area of the hatch. The screws have been removed. Everything is set for... there's John Graham knocking on the side in the series of 3, and out came the hatch. You could probably hear the pop from here. And there go hands inside the capsule. The doctors are coming up because they'll be conducting tests at this point. As I understand it from a few of them, this medical test is very important to them. There goes Dr. Pollard out with some sort of garment. Just removed the helmet. They've just removed Gordo's helmet. And that's officials and McDonnell engineers are around. There comes the helmet inboard on the elevator. Dr. Charlie Opp is there along with Dr. Pollard. They're talking to Gordon in the capsule. Recovery team leader John Graham is standing slightly to the side of them, talking through the hatch, grinning from ear to ear. It appears from this distance. John is quite a grinner. He is a happy sort of fellow. Now other officials are running out. Here comes the red carpet. being rolled out. This is a test I didn't know they were going to do. They kept this more or less secret from me. The doctors are talking, still leaning over talking, shaking their head up and down, yes, and apparently everything is okay in the capsule. In just a moment we'll probably have some information from NASA officials as to the condition, but Gordo has already said he's in fine shape. It's quite a scene, one you'll never forget if you can see it, and I hope you can. The capsule sitting there on the number 3 elevator of the USS Kearsarge for about an hour now. We've been describing the pickup, which has been magnificent. To recap slightly for you, Space 7 impacted about 2 miles off the port bow of the USS Kearsarge, cutting their former record for a flight impact by half, a little better than half, because during the last recovery it was 4.5 miles. This time, 2 miles. And incidentally, Chaplain Fairchild had predicted that it would be at just that spot. I've got to have a long talk with him. The capsule came down just as it said. A specially made MA9 Space 7 flag will be broken as soon as the astronaut is out of the capsule. I assume that's up on the, broken up on the island right here in front of my face. That means they're going to hoist it. For those of you who don't know Navy lingo, they're going to hoist a special Space 7 flag right here in front of me. I see a single Manila. We'll look down below with it in readiness. They're still getting those medical readings. Dr. Pollard told me that these were very important to the mission, MA9, but they get these readings both before and after he got out of the capsule. To recap that operation for you slightly, Dr. Pollard tells me the idea is to get reclining checks on Gordon's blood pressure, his pulse rate, his heartbeat, all of these things while he's still in the prone position in the contoured couch of the capsule Phase 7. And then, as soon as he steps out of the capsule, they take an additional reading, and the readings will be recorded within the capsule itself by means of a special extension cord which Dr. Pollard was showing me the other night. It has identical fittings so that it can hook on to the fittings on Gordo's suit. There's one down on his right thigh and another up on his left arm. These will be to take pressure of his heart, blood pressure, I should say, his heartbeat, his pulse rate, respiration, all of these things. And this is done because during the Syrah flight, it was noted that there was a slight discoloration of Wally's feet because apparently being in a capsule for an extended period of weightlessness will cause the same effect as prolonged bed rest, perhaps as much as 2 to 3 weeks. That means that the blood in the feet does not rise as quickly as it should, and it causes lightheadedness and dizziness. And they're going to make sure that whether or not this is one of the conditions of prolonged weightlessness. So something was just handed to Dr. Upp from out of the capsule. John Graham handed it over. Dr. Pollard is immediately in front of the capsule, looking in, talking, passing things back and forth, and I assume they're conducting the readings that I just told you about. While we're waiting to see what happens down there, an interesting phenomenon developed here today. Perhaps it's significant. Directly overhead, something that I never saw even during my 2 years in the Pacific. 360-degree rainbow immediately overhead, right around the sun. It's a strange sight to see. A 360-degree, that is a complete circle rainbow. A complete circular rainbow right over top of the USS Kearsarge, which now has astronaut Gordon Cooper and the space capsule Space 7 safely aboard. Gordon Cooper has told the helicopter pilots earlier he's in fine shape. And I assume that directly we're going to be getting those very words from Dr. Pollard, who will be making a statement as to the conditions after, of course, an extended examination down in the ship's sick bay. The sick bay has several very fine rooms laid out with equipment ready to conduct all sorts of examinations, including chest X-ray. They're going to test his reflexes. They will take blood samplings and all of that sort of thing that normally goes on in a complete physical examination. Dr. Pollard tells me that it's just as thorough as a complete physical examination, and perhaps a little more so. Now they're grouping around. I see NASA cameramen. Apparently they're getting ready to help Rado egress, as they call it, or leave the capsule. They're all grouped around the entrance now. Here he comes, there he comes. A big cheer goes up from the ship as he's being helped to turn. He turned and waved to the island and smiled a great big smile. Dr. Pollard on his right arm, and John Graham, NASA recovery team leader, on his left arm. Dr. Charles up immediately behind him. He has not turned. Apparently they are conducting the medical test by means of the extension cord that I told you about earlier. In case you tuned in late, this extension cord is done in order that the readings might be the same, recorded on the same recording instrument as they were before. Here he is now standing on the deck of the USS Kearsarge. Before, he was standing on aboard. The Phase 7 flag has been broken in full display, proudly waving over the leading Mercury recovery ship, USS Kearsarge. That was written sort of propaganda from a mighty proud, mighty cage. Gordon Cooper is now turned, facing the doctors. He's talking with Dr. Charles Up, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force. They're taking measurements, I'm sure, by means of the extension cord. I can see it from here. A band is playing in the hangar deck, welcoming astronaut Gordon Cooper aboard the USS Kearsarge. He's standing in approximately the same position where Platt now states that Wally Schirra was standing. Here he goes, walking under his own steam to a mighty cheer from the guys aboard the USS Kearsarge. Astronaut Gordon Cooper has now gone below to the sick bay. He is going through the hangar deck. I can describe this trip to you briefly. He will be heading down to the ship's sick bay, whereupon he will receive a complete physical examination. So once more, let me recap this whole picture for you briefly before leaving. Phase 7 capsule came down within 2 miles of the USS Kearsarge, landing about 10 degrees off the port bow.
That report from Joe Campbell aboard the Kearsarge, telling us about the dramatic moment when astronaut Gordon Cooper got out of his spacecraft and walked smiling to the sick bay. He was out of the spacecraft at 7:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you may have heard those cheers from the assembled sailors on board the carrier. Reporters outside the Cooper's home in Taylor Lake Village in Texas say they also heard cheers inside at the time of landing. We'll be back in just a moment. We're going to pause right now so that our stations around the country can identify themselves. This is Dallas Townsend at Cape Canaveral.
This is the CBS Radio Network.
Shaker is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Shaker pleasure doesn't fade even when your thirst is done. The most rewarding flavor in this man's world for people who are having fun. Shaker is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Shaker is the one beer to have when you're having more than one.
This is WCBS and WCBS FM New York, your radio news station.
This is Dallas Townsend at Cape Canaveral with the CBS News coverage of the flight of Faith 7, brought to you by the Schick Safety Razor Company and Newsweek magazine. The flight of Faith 7, as you've already heard, has ended in a colossal, stunning success. Astronaut Leroy Gordon Cooper flew around the world 22 times in a total time of 34 hours, 20 minutes, 30 seconds. He was in the capsule for 37 hours, 38 minutes. Now the latest from Shorty Powers.
Space than any man in the free world is in sick bay aboard the USS Kearsarge. He's not there because he's sick. He's there because he needs to be examined now. He needs some rest after having spent 34 hours and 20 minutes in space. Launched from Cape Canaveral at 8:04 a.m. yesterday morning. Landed in the Pacific Ocean at 6:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this evening. A happy and apparently enthusiastic space pilot. We will have a preliminary report based on early medical examination within about an hour. In the meantime, this is Mercury Control signing off.
Well, that was the exuberant voice of Colonel Shorty Powers after many hours of strain and tension as he and everybody else in Mercury Control, the rest of us here at Cape Canaveral and around the world, monitored the triumphant flight of astronaut Leroy Gordon Cooper. We're going to pause momentarily now for a message from Newsweek magazine.
Newsweek magazine space analysts talk to one another in terms of parabolic velocity, solar plasma, and anaerobic life. But for Newsweek's readers, they can turn literally mountains of technical facts into a story as graphic and gripping as any adventure you've ever read. Edwin Diamond, Henry Simmons, Irwin Goodwin, Henry W. Hubbard, and their associates, Newsweek's space team, have turned out 22 cover stories and hundreds of smaller pieces for the magazine in the 6 short years since the space age began with Sputnik 1. Next week, Major Gordon Cooper's flight. Newsweek was the first news weekly to devote a full department to space and the atom. The reporting, factual. The perspective, complete and in-depth. The magazine, Newsweek. At your newsstand now.
Colonel Powers said a few moments ago that astronaut Cooper was going to sickbay aboard the carrier Kearsarge, not because he was sick, but because he needed rest, and that certainly was a severe understatement. He also needs detailed medical scientific analysis, and in the next 2 days he will be spending aboard the Kearsarge. He will go through the detailed process known as debriefing, a detailed examination and examination of the physical condition of the pilot and a report, in his own words, while everything that he has gone through in the past 40 hours is fresh in his mind. Well, we understand that Colonel Powers, who signed off just a moment ago from Mercury Control, is about to sign on again. At least that's the message we have right here. So we're going to hear again from Mercury Control and Shorty Powers. Well, maybe Colonel Powers is not going to sign on again after all. In one of his last reports from Mercury Control, he spoke of the great enthusiasm and excitement and relief and jubilation that marked that nerve center of this Mercury Atlas 9 operation, the longest space flight ever flown by an American. Not as long as the space flights of the Russians, Nikolaev and Popovich, but the United States space program obviously is moving in that direction as we move out of the Mercury program into the 2-man Gemini capsule program, and after that the Apollo lunar program, which is intended to put an American on the moon sometime late in this decade.
Feet, which has pushed the experience of man a good deal further in many ways than it has been. We're proud of Major Cooper, and we're proud of all those thousands of Americans who worked with him to make this flight possible. And indeed, in a sense, all Americans were on this flight, because all of them have sustained this program in good times and in bad. And it represents a great achievement for our society and a great achievement for free men and women. Peace has her victories as well as war, and this was one of the victories for the human spirit today. From the reception.
That was President Kennedy making a statement at the White House just now on the triumphant return of astronaut Leroy Gordon Cooper. As we told you a few moments ago, Mr. Kennedy had previously been in telephone contact with Mrs. Cooper at her home outside Houston, Texas, and he said that he was amazed at the surprising accuracy of the splashdown, only 2 miles from the carrier Kearsarge in the Pacific. Now, we understand that Colonel Powers is signing on again at Mercury Control, so we're going to switch from our CBS News headquarters trailer here at Canaveral to Mercury Control and Lieutenant Colonel John Shorty Powers.
Probably one of the most interesting voice exchanges during this flight was that between astronaut Gordon Cooper and astronaut Scotty Carpenter in Hawaii. We recorded that information on a tape recorder and are prepared to play it back to you at this time. This is Mercury Control, over to the tape.
Roger, Phase 7, what's your status? Phase 7, Hawaii, Capcom, say your status, over. Roger, Phase 7, is doing fine, Roger, is your altimeter off the peg yet, over?